Perfect. So welcome again. It is a pleasure to be thinking about how to practically apply some of these big issues of survey design, of research question design to the administration. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to actually take a series of case studies from when one of us has actually had to face that question of how do you apply analytics to public administration? And that practicality is something you've asked for, but it's also something we're getting practice in ourselves. We want to try to be responsive to what it is that you are asking for in terms of your work. So as you hear the case studies, think about what it is you'd like to measure, what you've been thinking about the last few weeks, and then how you can apply these lessons. And then let's focus on your project. Alan is going to provide his example. He's going to think a little bit about his work and how he's been doing analytics in the public administration. And then I want to hear about your work. We can have labs. So if you've got a question, you say, how do I do this? Let's talk about it. And we can do that either one-to-one, we can do it in small groups or big groups. We can work that out. And what I'd like us to do is then think about what's the data we want to collect, because next week is going to all be about data management. So you're going to have this question. That was the first week. You're going to have a theory of why that question is important. Maybe you're going to have collected some data. But you'll see today what we're going to do is go through how did we face each question? How did we collect data? And then next week, you're going to think about data management. So we're on a journey. We're on a journey to do better analytics in the service. We also appreciate that you want us to get you some international experience. And so as Madam Elizabeth requested, could we get someone from Singapore? We have found a public servant who's associated with the Blavatnik School of Government, with the help of Martin Williams, professor there, who's worked a lot with your service. And that Singaporean official is going to be coming, telling you a little bit about how they do the work that they do to be such an effective service. We also heard that you wanted us to do data management, data visualization, and we've brought those things. So keep asking questions and we will try and forge a course that is best placed to help you become the service that you want. So let me talk about my experience of doing analytics in Ghana's public service. So as many of you know, I've been working with your teams for a long time. And if anyone wants to come in, please do. And one of the questions that is a very global question is, how do we know how effective and productive Ghana's civil service is? In my first talk to you all, I asked that question. So you're going to have answers. So just, again, think for a moment, how do we judge what the most effective organizations in Ghana's public service are? And now another question, what about not just public service, which includes, of course, all the parastatals and the agencies, what about the civil service? Who are the most effective civil service units and organizations in your mind? And you must have some measure of performance in your head. And so when I asked myself that question, and I sat with Alan and Jane and the head of service and others, and we said, you know, how are we going to conceptualize this? We said, well, a lot of what civil service does is about process. A lot. So I'm going to try and share my screen now, and I hope it doesn't crash. Let's see. All right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see.
Very good. And we thought to ourselves, well,
yes, I can also see.
That's excellent. Thank you. Much of public service is about trying to process files, get budgets done, procurement, audit, planning, budget, licensing. So a productive civil service agency is one that processes productively. But what does that mean? That's not something we're taught. And so we had some thoughts. Well, it's maybe fast, but you also don't want it just to be fast. You want it to adhere to civil service procedure. You want the quality of the decision making to be high quality. And so we thought to ourselves, well, there is process productivity. There's the productivity of process. It's process that is fast, that adheres to procedure, that is high quality. Has anyone ever measured that before? Yeah, a little bit. There's a couple of academics who kind of done this. But what we said was, this is our question. How do we know what a productive agency in civil service is? Well, there's a lot of process going on. So my research question is going to be about how do you measure the process quality in Ghana's civil service? So that's what we're going to talk about. How did I do that? Well, just a little indication of what we did. We did two things. One is we said, how quickly do government departments process government business? We took head of service response requests, and we saw how many people responded and how fast. I'm going to come back to this graph later. We also assessed adherence to government procedure. And here you're going to see, I'm going to talk this through in a bit, the fact that different government agencies actually have different qualities of how well they adhere to government procedure. And we also looked at the quality of the process. So we made some progress. How did we do that? The first thing we did was we sat down with PRAD. I don't know if any PRAD members are on the training right now. Certainly there are, I think, some PRAD officials in the training more generally. We sat down with a number of excellent technicians, and they were able to say to us, look, these are the things that we think matter. And so, everyone see that? We started coming up with an assessment tool, all right? And we said, well, what are the features of, and everyone can see that Word document? Yeah,
yeah, we can see it.
Mm-hmm. What are the features of an effective process? And how are we going to find that out? Let's go unit by unit. And I take my hat off to Alan and anyone else here who actually did this work. Let's go unit by unit, and we're just going to draw a file, right? And we're going to look through it, and we're going to do that a few times, and we're going to talk about why we did that, because we can only really understand process if we go to the unit and actually draw files and then understand how well is this file being processed. That's as close as you're going to get. You might be able to look over someone's shoulders. You might be able to survey them, but really, objectively, where the process is being followed is in civil service files. So we then said to ourselves, what are the features that matter? We opened a Word document, right? Completely new one. And we said, let's think through what are the features that matter. Well, the first thing is there effective process laid out? How complete's the file ladder, right? Are folios well organized? What proportion of correspondence has an articulation of where it came from, right? Are there discrepancies, duplicates? So is it well organized? To what extent are there background to the issues? To what extent do we clearly outline what courses of action are available and so forth? And then we said, to what extent are the problems in the file not to do with the individual unit, but to do with others, and so forth. And we polished and talked through this, but we created from nothing an instrument. And then what we did was we piloted this instrument by going to a few offices. Everyone's been there. Everyone knows what these places. Excuse me. Everyone knows what these places look like. And so here's the picture of the OHCS. Mr. Solomon, you're welcome to ask a question. Are you looking to ask a question? Okay, no problem. Anyone can come in at any time. And this is what we faced. We faced, like, you know, many versions of this. You've all been into your file stores. If we just take one file, then you may just be unlucky and just find a file that isn't really showing you the quality of process in that unit. So what we did is we took a series of files from across time, across subject matters, and we had MSD staff basically going through and auditing, assessing along the lines that I just showed you in that specific template. And slowly but surely, we created data. And here's the data. Here's the file sample. And so in our Excel spreadsheets, we started to actually produce here we go, an outline that tells us what ministry, what division, what's the file reference, and we crafted a data set from nothing. So we started with this, which is just a lot of files. We created a conceptual framework, a theory of change, because we had a research question about process. And then we went to each unit, took the set of potential files, drew a series from across time. Again, I take my hat off to all those involved. We came up with data. So what did we do then? Well, the first thing we did was just visualize it, describe it. And that's what you learned about with Marco. You know, how do you just start? The best thing you can do with data, first thing, is visualize it. That's always been true. Have a look at it. How long are the tails? So what does this tell us? So what this is the speed at which the OHCS received responses to standardized requests that it makes every year. And what you see is, if we just visualize it, is that there's a lot of people who submit on the deadline. But there are some units which take a very, very long time. They delay OHCS business, right? And that visualization is already quite powerful. It already tells us that actually there are some units that are slowing down OHCS when, you know, the majority of units have submitted by the deadline. If we show you that for one period, you think to yourself, yeah, you know, I appreciate that some units sometimes they do. But what if there's data collection over time? Well, of course, in your correspondence records, you can see which units are the ones that consistently delay OHCS business. Once you collect, and that's what we did, once you collect data across multiple different requests, you start to see some units, some ministries are persistently slowing down OHCS business in one visual. So we had a research question. How do you measure the productivity of public servants? We had a theory of change, which is the idea that the service as a whole processes a lot. We created a different set of measures from nothing. We got primary data, and we showcased something very new in Ghana. And same idea here is that, do you remember the template I showed you that had all those different scores? We basically put all that data together in a single Excel, and we simply said, if we score individual organizations and divisions on how well they actually try to adhere to government procedure, then what scores do you get? These are the scores. So this is real data from across your civil service. 5 is perfect adherence to civil service procedure. 0, which of course no one got, is 0 adherence, but we got a lot of variation between 1 and 4. So you've got a lot of organizations that have got a lot to learn about adhering to civil service procedure, and you've got a lot of places that can teach them. And interestingly, so these blue solid dots are organizational averages. Within each organization, the red hollow dots are division averages, which means even if you're down here, say, or here, there's still divisions within your organization who are adhering very effectively to public service procedure. So there are units within the organization that can teach other units how to do better processing. Okay. I've done this in other countries. This is an example from Liberia, where once again, we wanted to see to the extent that which appraisal process was really being adhered to. And so we collected data where we said, well, what would it mean for someone to actually do an appraisal process effectively? Do they have forms, which is what you see here, simply just understanding, do you have appraisal forms? But then we can go beyond that. Do the forms say anything beyond this person has done well? And that's the problem with appraisals, is typically it just says people have done well. You want to stretch people. So then we judged to what extent are these appraisal forms actually pushing the individual employee to do something novel, to do something interesting, to do better in their job. So we've done the same thing in Liberia. That's my story of how we were working with OHCS. There was a question. There was a theory of change. There was data collection. There was data visualization. So if anyone has any reflections on that, Alan, if you'd like to say a few words, as you were so important to it, and then we can always move on to other examples. But I think what this showcases is the ideas that you're hearing in abstract can be a very real application to your work. And even if you say, I'm in an audit, or I'm in budget, or I'm in procurement, each of those are so important to the effective functioning of the civil service. Let's create a little bit of data and analyze it so we can see, maybe even just to see how effectively your organization, your unit is doing. Okay, so let me stop sharing here. Alan, please, if you'd like to come
in. Thank you, Dan.
Jane, wonderful to hear
Hello.
you. Please, go ahead.
Yes, Alan is still putting himself together. He will join us soon.
Lovely.
Yes, so I think that's a very good research that was conducted, and I'm sure that a lot of things have changed after that. But also for us from OACS, we have also taken some steps, to come out with new ways of doing things to improve our work. I don't know if it's time for us to share examples from our various units or directorates.
Please, go ahead.
Okay, so so I'm sure almost all of us know about the annual performance reports that is generated by OACS every year to the president. And usually before these reports are submitted to OACS, the various ministries and departments are supposed to develop their reports for the year, and then they submit to OACS. So before this assignment came to our unit, we knew that there was a league table in terms of who submits first, and sometimes it's used for some kind of assessment for the organization. But we wanted to understand not only the timeliness, but also the quality of the reports that come in. So we sat down, trying to come out with ways to improve the contents of the reports that the various ministries submit to us. So for the first time, we collated information based on, so before they submit this report, we also give them some guidelines and some training on how we want the report to be like. But we kept, receiving reports that were not of good. So then we had this idea to come up with some ways, to improve it, to help everyone. So we looked through the reports, and then we collected some information for in terms of creating a template based on the various indicators in the report. So before that, people think that OACS does not really read the report, but we came out with this template that is able to tell if you've been able to follow the guidelines properly, and then we are also able to give you feedback within a day or two to tell you the areas that you are not doing well, so that you can improve and then report back to us. So it was a way of helping the various ministries to also develop very good reports. But another aspect of the whole exercise was that we still cannot tell if these reports are of good quality, because people can submit them on a timely basis. They will follow all the guidelines, but in terms of the content, whether whether it's of good quality, it was difficult to measure. So currently, I would say that there has been an improvement in the annual performance reports that are being submitted now compared to some years ago. And also, we are also able to identify the various sections that people find difficult to report on. So there was this portion that realized people did not really understand what we mean by, I don't remember, but there's one indicator that people didn't really understand what it was. So most of the ministries were not reporting on that. Yes, I think the risk
was
management.
Was it about the risk?
Yes. Thank you, Benedict. Yes, so immediately we had to either take that section off or have a training, like to explain further during our trainings for preparing this report. So it also helped us to understand which areas people are really reporting very well and the areas that we need to support them to be able to improve. Currently, what we are looking at is moving a step ahead to actually measure the quality of the content. So in reporting in the APR, we expect that people do not repeat achievements. People do not repeat things that were done in the previous year. So now we have to look at it and see if the baseline or wherever they got to in the previous year, there has been an improvement. Then we can tell that, okay, this report is of good quality because it's not just a repetition, but it's telling us the progress. But sometimes it's very difficult to do that because we have different officers working on this report. And so unless you have to go and pull out the report from the previous year and also to check whether it's the same or like the content is changed. But this is very difficult for us because we're also working within the time frame and we need to finish the report as soon as possible. So I think this whole idea of developing a template to look at the timeliness, the quality, and then making sure people are following the guidelines has improved the types of report that we are receiving now. And we hope that we'll be able to come up with other ways to be able to really check the quality of the content, which we are currently working on. So this is from the OACS RC unit. Thank you.
I don't know if anyone wanted to come in. Benedict, if you'd like to say some more words. I don't know if Madam Elizabeth was with us.
Okay, so just to add to what Jane said, one of the measures we have adopted to identify or to curb the repetitions is that we are now asking for progress of implementation, and we've just started that with just one component of the document, that is the achievement. So when we look at a policy area or a focus area or an achievement that the ministry can count on, we want to know when the previously we were just looking at the year under review, but now upon further analysis, we note that some of these things started way back, and it's possible for the institutions to repeat them. So now what we do is that we want to measure the trend of progress. So we don't just request for information of the year under review. We ask for a trend, a progression, so that we can analyze the trend analysis. You know, we can do some trend analysis to analyze the progress of implementation or achievements. And this is just one aspect, one component of the document. It's just the achievement that we have started with. We are still studying it. We are still thinking through and discussing so that we would find better ways of improving on the quality of the reports.
I mean, I wish I was wearing a hat so I could do the TOF, because that is just fantastic. What I love about the examples that you just gave is that a lot of what you're doing is a learning exercise for the other agencies. It's not just accountability. It's actually saying, oh, you didn't understand that, so let's come together but it's data that allowed you to identify there wasn't learning. And similarly, the fact that you're just slowly strengthening people's ability to reflect on where they are is not just about accountability. It's also about enabling everyone to think about where they are, the progress they're making, potentially to change their policy. So I thought that was a very fine example. Maybe Alan or Madam Elizabeth or anyone else would like to come in on that.
All right, so thank you very much, Dan. Sorry, my network. Okay, so it went off and I had to call the IT guys to come and help me with it. But I think they have said so much about a few things that we are doing currently. I didn't get the beginning of your questions, but listening to them, I gather you want to know what we have done so far to improve the work processes.
I think what we're doing is we're providing examples, practical examples of how you take a question, like, are the annual performance reviews providing us with a strong understanding of the performance of the agencies, and then we're talking about how do we actually get to somewhere that we've got a good process.
So basically I think the whole office OACS, what we do currently, it's virtually the same as what Jane and Benedict has talked about, because then in the other directorates, all reports that are generated, as you are aware, OACS is an HR office for the entire Ghana Civil Service. So all the necessary information that we require from the ministries and departments, we vet them, we get back to them. So for instance, in addition for me being at the responsibility units, I'm also with the recruitment training and development directorate. And so for instance, when we request for training reports from the ministries and the departments, we vet, because we normally would give them a template or a guide as to how or what they have to provide for us, what we want to see. And we always go back to them to tell them what went wrong, what didn't go wrong, what didn't go right, and what went right, and all that. And so basically, yes, for almost everything that we do here, I know for the other directorates, like the career management directorate, they are also doing the same, you know, in terms of getting back to the clients, our clients, main clients being the civil service staff, you know, to give them much information about, you know, a lot of the things that we request them, either to, you know, request for all these information, weren't getting back to them, they don't know. So next time, if you go back to them, give me this, give me that, there was that, you know, hesitance, people releasing a lot of the information that we require. But now they've known that OACS is serious. OACS means business. OACS is moving forward in the right direction. In addition to all these, you know, we've introduced a lot of e-platform activities. So recruitment, everything we're doing is e. In terms of the training, everything, we coordinate everything through electronic means, you know, getting to all our people through electronic means. The APR that he talked about, we didn't request for any hard copy. So what we asked them to do, we've created an email address where we ask them to forward that, and then we will respond to them via same, you know, and all that. So I would say that for OACS as an institution, now we have actually moved forward, and we are hoping that this year and in the coming years we will even do better in terms of our work processes. All right. I hope I haven't deviated.
That is something to celebrate. You're taking steps that, as we've heard, are directly improving at the most practical, small micro step level. Is you're just making the process stronger, and these things, you know, big changes, that's what they always say, big changes start with these small steps, and then you're 100 steps down the road and you look back and you say, we are where we are because we took all of those steps. So absolutely fantastic, madam. I honestly, and your leadership in this has been, you know, is something to celebrate as well.
Yeah, thank you. I can also say that, for instance, you know, appraisals, staff performance appraisals, in the past it has been manual. It's you know, coordinated manually, but now we are starting an e-SPA. We call it e-SPA, electronic staff performance as appraisal, and we are rolling it out here in OACS, or we are piloting it in OACS this year. A lot has been done so far, and I think by next month, Benedict, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it will go live for OACS to pilot it. So what it is that the staff performance appraisal that used to be manual, it's quite voluminous, about 11 page document. Everything is being transferred to the electronic means, and they have trained it, since we are starting with OACS, all the people involved in ensuring that officers complete their staff performance appraisals and all that have been trained to you know, as it were, if people start feeding in the information, pulling it and analyzing it and doing all kinds of things with it. For instance, the Recruitment Training and Development Directorate, we have a key stake in that, because then we'll then go in there and pull all the training needs of the individual. In the documents, one of the requirements is what training the person required to enable him or her undertake the assignment or the task that has been assigned to him within the year. And so we will want to know that, and then try and compare it as the years go by, the mid-year, to see what is happening. Has the person been able to, is he helping the person to improve on what the work that he's doing or what? And at the end of the year, how has the person come? Was it all the training undertaken, and has the person been able to improve? You know, so you know, these are about a few things that I can think on top of my head that OACS is doing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And before we open up, we've had a series of examples from Ghana's civil service. We're going to now actually pass it over to my colleagues who are going to talk about experience from the international arena that they've been involved in. But would anyone else like to add to what Madam Elizabeth is saying and just give their reflections on where they've used digital data, or they've collected their own data, or anything along those margins, and it's supported their work? So floor is open for now, and then we can come back if you'd rather speak later.
I said floor is open for something.
Yes, Alan, your mic is off, and you're welcome to give us any aspects of your work that you think has been enriched by practically taking a little bit of data and then using that to improve your workflow.
Okay, Dan, thank you. I don't know if there's a time to share this with regards to improving client service delivery outcome in the Ghana Civil Service. So we actually developed, we just wanted to measure client service delivery is actually one of the important indicators to measure performance within the public space. So that's, and much more so timely response to service delivery within the Ghana Civil Service. So what we did was to actually create this. Actually, this is not practical in that sense, but to create a theory of change out of this. So in that sense, OECS actually has its clients that we provide services to, and knowing that it's one of the ways in which we deliver on our performance, we actually decided to use the client service charter, which actually provides the services that we give to our clients internally and externally. With regards to that, we said, okay, we needed to ask ourselves some relevant questions, okay, that what is the impact of training on service delivery outcomes in the Ghana Civil Service? And in asking this question, we will want to know whether the training that we deliver to our staff actually impact on the delivery of services to our client, both internally and externally. So we actually developed a theory of change where we had the inputs, and the inputs actually looked at officers who were to be trained, and also the input of facilitators. Actually, the funds, the availability of funds to support the training program, and then the platforms or the mediums to use during training, whether they were in-person trainings or virtual trainings or online trainings. We also came up with some assumptions that in doing so, we'll have with the officers, we identify the officers and they were available for training. We also looked at the facilitators who should be well trained in providing this kind of client service delivery training for officers within the civil service. And also an assumption that there's already an availability of funds which has been earmarked for such trainings. There is the training structure, which is the CSTC, whether now because of COVID, we have the virtual platforms and all that. So this is actually the input that goes into the service delivery training. And we have the activities. So the activities actually looks at OECS absorbing the cost of the training sessions on service delivery by facilitators, and then having practical sections or role play by the trainees who are being trained. And also for them, one of the good things that would help them will be to develop an action plan to be implemented within their various organizations, so that this will be more practical to them and for them to relate better. And and also as part of the activities within such a delivery, we have the pre and post training assessments to measure whether they gain some knowledge or to measure the state in which they were, and after the training, their state, whether there was an impact. So these are the activities. It also comes with its assumptions that the training course will be absorbed by OECS facilitators, train participants on effective service delivery. Participants also perform their role plays and all that. So these are actually those assumptions that are related to the activities. Then we look at the output. What are the output of such training programs or such training interventions? OECS would be able to provide service delivery training curriculums for the officers being trained. So actually, this is actually the task of CSTC, which is a training school under OECS. And OECS also provide the learning structure and the logistics that are needed for the training. It also comes with this assumption that the assumption is like, all things being equal, these things that we are saying are available, or they are in place, they are well in place. After that, after the outputs, we also looked at the outcome. Okay, so the outcome would also look at trainees' ability to develop service delivery plans within their respective ministries or departments. And the assumptions actually on that are whether participants are able to develop action plan, or the assumption will be that participants are able to develop action plans that will benchmark their delivery service within their ministries. Let me jump. There is also another outcome which will look at the improvement of service delivery by the ministries. So that's a second outcome. And the assumption will be that ministry service delivery outcomes will improve. So the impact of this, which is the final outcome, the impact of this is to look at improvement of service delivery outcomes within the civil service for both internal and external clients of the civil service. Basically, with this assumption that the civil service service delivery outcome within the civil service will be improved, or will be much better after the training has been given. The data collection tools that we can use would focus on the process evaluation, where in doing all these in engaging or in training staff to enhance their service delivery, to enhance the service delivery outcome of the service. We will look at whether the training that is being implemented is being implemented to its intended beneficiaries. So whether one process evaluation for such a training is to know whether the training is actually being given to the right people. So maybe the HR directorates, actually, whether they are the people who are being given that training, and also looking at the extent, to what extent are trainers training officers based on the service delivery models within the curriculum. And one process evaluation is also to look at whether there are unique challenges to implementing such trainings, and what are the benefits for officers, what benefits are for officers who are being trained. And the outcome probably evaluation, or the outcome areas that we can take data from, is did officers gain knowledge on improving service delivery after the training? And did all officers benefit from service delivery training, or only just a few did? These are ways that we can measure whether the training that has been delivered is impactful to officers in their various ministries and at large the civil service. So basically, this is something that I'll have to share. Thank you, Dan.
Alan, if I may, listening to you is like listening to a prof. You've thought so hard and deep about this, and that's actually one of the benefits, is if you take seriously having a question, having a theory of change, thinking about measurement. In fact, what you're doing is you're doing yourself a service, because you're pushing yourself to think very deeply through, why are we training? Why are we giving people time off to train? What is the benefit for ourselves as a service, and then to our end users? So I compliment everything that you just said. Mr. Ansong Toabi, I think you wanted to come in.
Yes, we wanted to share our experience from MSD, Management Services Department. We have also done something in line with the client service, but slightly different from what Alan earlier mentioned. Our department, we work under OACS, and we don't deal directly with the public. We work for public service institutions, so service to service relationship that we have. And as part of our client service unit mandate, we are to take feedback from our clients. Unfortunately, hardly do they come with their feedback. So we have adopted a strategy, a proactive one, to rather go to our clients once in a year and have a discussion with them sometimes, or through a questionnaire for them to complete for us, to give us the feedback we need in order to improve our work. And for the first time last year, 2021, we conducted a client satisfaction survey for all, collecting data from all the ministries and then the departments that we have. We looked at areas such as the service that we provide, which ones are preferred by our clients, just to know what they think of our services and which areas that they are preferred. Then we also try to identify areas of excellence. And so among all the services that we provide to them, all the reports we generate for them, which ones are meeting or exceeding their expectations. We looked at also fees and charges, affordability level, then the professional conduct of our staff. So how in the course of our staff interaction with them, what are the impressions they have? Do they possess the necessary competencies? And do they carry themselves in a manner that shows that they are very professional and excellent in what they are doing? So we try to also measure that. And the last but not the least is that we try to identify new areas for service delivery. Are there new areas, emerging issues that our clients want us to move into to help them? So we try to identify these areas. So we focus on 5 main areas: preferred services, areas of excellence, professional conduct of our staff, new areas for service delivery. And we share the results with our major stakeholder, the OECS. We are hoping that in this year we'll repeat same and then build on the outcome of that survey in order to improve our service and engagement with our clients. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. What I love about this session is it's a platform for us to share our individual innovations, our individual ideas and examples of how practically so many members of the public service in Ghana are currently actually, actively going out, trialing these data systems or, surveys or data collection efforts that we're talking about in this course. And it inspires me, but it also, I think, gives everyone an opportunity to see this is practically happening. This is supporting decision making. You've all given examples that say, if we didn't have the data in the way that you just shared it, the particular conclusions wouldn't be as salient. They wouldn't have allowed you to take forward the decision making in as easy a way. Now we'll talk about taking data and actually creating public action, public change. That's a process that doesn't always happen. But the fact that you've highlighted problems and issues using data throughout the service, it's very inspiring. If anyone else would like to come in at this time, please do. Otherwise, we can go to my colleagues who've got some examples from international experience.
Hello?
Hello, is that Mr. Solomon?
Yeah, this is Solomon from Government Secretariat School.
Very
the
good.
Government Secretariat School is also one of the training institutions. Government Secretariat School is one of the training institutions under Office of the Head of Civil Service, OACS. Last year, we also conducted a survey to help us improve on our curriculum. We look at issues like factors militating against the work of the secretary. We look at the expectations of the general public. The work of the secretary has undergone a tremendous change due to the introduction of new technologies in the public service and then the private sector. And so we decided to conduct a survey to test how our clients see the products from the Government Secretariat School, the secretaries. How relevant are they to the world of work? What are the expectations of the superior officers, you know, of how secretaries deliver on the job? They will also look at factors that militate against the secretaries themselves. We did 2 questionnaires. We did one for the secretaries themselves. What are they, I mean, what do they, does the work or their superior officers want them to do? Are they able to do or they are unable to do? If they are unable to do, what were the reasons why they are unable to do? And what training interventions do they think would be of help? Then we also designed a questionnaire for the superior officers, how they also see the work of the secretary. How are they performing? So we have a chart to test the secretary's ability to use certain gadgets, sophisticated recording machines, shredding machine, the fax, the computer, and then the Microsoft Outlook. How efficient are they on the machines, and then how are they performing? And the rationale behind the survey was to help us to improve on our curriculum. And after the survey, we analyzed, I mean, we actually administered the questionnaire, and the questionnaire were analyzed. Then we have the outcome. We have received recommendations from the general public, from the perspective of the secretary, how them so that they remain competitive, functional, and participatory, or, I mean, relevant to the world of work. We also have feedback from superior officers, how they want secretaries to work. And we realized that, at the end of the survey, we realized that secretaries who don't take advantage of modern technologies render themselves, I mean, they are at risk of losing their relevance to the world of work, because the machines that are coming, if you don't improve on yourself, it will mean that if you want to rely on the old facility that we used to work, in no time you'll be out of business, you'll be redundant. And so we have done a draft of a curriculum we presented in our director's assessment at OACS. We also signed agreement with the chief director, and as part of the agreement, I mean, we come out with things that we are going to do to improve on our services. And so this was one of the things that we put as our focus area, and we were just assessed last week and we presented this research outcome to the chief director at OACS. And so we've done the first draft of what we want to add to what we teach in Government Secretariat School in order to make our secretaries more productive and also be relevant nationally and internationally. So this is what Government Secretariat School has done so far. For our facilitators who may be new, maybe this is the first time you've heard about government secretariat school. It was an old school that was established in 1952, and to also train secretaries, the secretarial class within the civil service. And we have been doing this for the past 69 or 68 years. Thank you.
Mrs. Solomon, again, a fantastic example of where this is being done throughout the service. And I love those words. If you don't update yourself, if you don't keep up with new developments, you will find yourself out of date. And I think that's spot on. It makes me think I need to go back and do a bit of schoolwork myself, but it also makes me think that that's what this course is about, both on the World Bank side, understanding the practical expression of analytics in the service that you're doing. So we're learning from you. And I hope that we can, as a group, see this exercise not just as trying to learn specific things, but be inspired by our colleagues who are implementing these activities. Mr. Solomon, can I ask one follow-up? What was the Chief Director's response to your work? And you can be honest if it wasn't a lot of excitement, but I'm very intrigued.
Well, he was excited about it, but you know, the Chief Director made it clear that yes, he appreciated the work, but he's expecting us to put the outcome to use so that we derive the maximum benefit from the survey. So we don't just do the survey to present to him, just to impress him that, okay, we have done this, this is the document. Now, how practical, you know, are we able to put this to use so as to benefit our client and also, I mean, help the secretary improve on their lot so as to benefit Ghana as a whole, and for that matter, the Ghana Civil Service. We want to see the practical outcome. So at least after this survey, after changing I mean, adding something to the syllabus, they want to see the new secretary, you know, that we are producing. So they are expecting us to move a step further to practicalize what we have just done on paper. They want to see that maybe in 1 year, in a 6 months, 1 year, when we deploy secretaries to the job market, how are they going to work? Are they going to be different from the old stock, or they will be the same, or they are going to see something different? So they have thrown the challenge to us to see to get a feedback from the general public after this research.
Amen. And that's the exact challenge that is thrown down to me in this work that we're doing together. So we are commonly challenged, and I think it is wonderful to have that linkage across our world. So I want to now show 3 examples, expressions of this practical translation of good analytical work having practical outcomes from the 3 settings. So we're very fortunate to have Mantasha, Abhishek, and Adrian, who've all worked in public sector settings of one type or another. So I'm now going to hand over to them. They're going to share their experiences, and so we can see this is a phenomenon that's happening in Ghana and it's happening elsewhere. So Abhishek, I'm handing over to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I'm just sharing my screen. Can you all see my screen? Is it visible now?
Yes. Yep.
Great. Just a minute. Yes. So the example that I'm going to talk about is about, I mean, in 2017, I was working with the Indian government in the Ministry of Finance, in the Office of the Chief Economic Advisor. And he was very intrigued about this idea of universal basic income. That was a time when a lot of countries were thinking about it, especially the developed countries, but also a lot of pilots being running some of the sub-Saharan African countries. And he wanted to understand if there is a possibility to do it in India. And me and one of my colleagues, who at that point of time was actually at the World Bank, he was a consultant there, and he came to work with us for a short time, for a month. He wanted to get an exposure of the government. So he came and he joined us. So both of us were working closely on this thing. Now again, in this presentation, I'll just try to give a brief overview of the work that we did, how it was an important input to policy, some of the new ideas that we explored, also how we communicated our research findings, and also wider discussion with a lot of NGOs, also other researchers, and finally, some of the impact I'll try and show that the research made. Just to give a brief overview, UBI, I think most of us already know. The idea is that we try and give some basic income which is required for survival of human being to each one, everyone. So it's universal, everyone, rich, poor, everyone gets it. Also, it's unconditional. So it's not that you have to fulfill certain criteria. So only then you get it. So everyone gets it. And we treat people as agents and not subject, basically meaning that, you know, I mean, many of the times we don't believe in giving cash because we feel that, you know, especially poor people, they do not know how to use money. They may misuse it. They may use it for things like, say, liquor. I mean, that's a big concern in India. Many people highlight it. But then the idea is that we should be trusting them. So we should give them agency. They should be deciding. They know what they want, how they can use the money, and we should have faith in them. So these are the basic 3 tenets of the UBI. Of course, everything starts with a lot of work was already done. So a literature review, which we spoke about initially. So, you know, international experiments. So oil economies, for example, Nigeria and Iraq, they had proposed at some point of time. Iran also actually decided to cut back on oil subsidies and rather give direct money to people in their accounts. Advanced economies at that point of time, Switzerland was thinking about doing a pilot. They in fact had a referendum which was turned down. But the idea is that this whole link between productivity and income has broken down because of automation which is happening. So, you know, I mean, I may be productive, but I will not have a job because most of the jobs are being taken over by machines. So then what do? So we need to give money directly to people because, of course, many of the jobs are being replaced by machines. In low-income countries as well, Give Directly was an experiment which was being run by a huge grant of $30 million in many of the sub-Saharan countries. And here in low-income countries, the aim is basically poverty alleviation, and also because the state capacity is low. So to, you know, run many schemes, it's very challenging and difficult, and there are many issues. For example, you may not target beneficiaries. And then UBI, because it is universal, so you don't have to identify poor people. So you can then maybe, you know, reach out to at least make sure, yes, a lot of money going to rich people, but also making sure that all the poor people are also getting money. And the idea here is poverty alleviation. Now, just coming back to India, why we thought about UBI in India, in spite of the fact that India itself, like many other countries, was running hundreds of social welfare schemes targeted for poor. At that point of time, when we were doing this work, there were around 700 different schemes which were being run. But then think about, you know, theory of change, which we thought about earlier. Like the aim was that we introduced at given a certain point of time many of those schemes because we wanted to alleviate poverty. But do we see that change visible on the ground? And clearly, we did not see that in data. Still, the poverty levels were pretty high in India. So then identifying where, I mean, of course, the input is there. Every year, we're spending a lot of money. But then why do we not see that change either in the output? For example, you know, people are expected to have certain amount of food every month. So maybe, you know, people are not getting it. Or even if they're getting it, they still continue to remain poor. So where is that link broken and how can we fix it? So that was the basic motivation for undertaking this study. First thing, again, started with, you know, collecting raw data. Fortunately, unlike Dan, I had access to digitized data. So a lot of time and effort was saved. So government runs many schemes. So I'm just giving you an example of some of the big schemes that you see here, say SSA, MDM, and PMGSY. These are all schemes that the government runs. And these numbers that you see, these are annual expenditure. Each of the, I mean, these are districts, which is a small unit in India, a small geographical unit in India, and there are around 700 such districts in India, and how much money is being spent in each of these districts. And then some basic data. So yes, these individual schemes, overall money, how much is spent, how many poor households are there in each of these districts, and some other calculation that we did based on this Excel. But of course, this looks very boring. I mean, if I go with this Excel sheet to my bosses, I mean, it would be difficult to get their attention. So, but that we did some basic work and throw some basic, idea into why that link that we see that I spoke about earlier is broken from, input to output. We have a lot of schemes, 675. So at the on the grassroots level, bureaucrats like me at that point of time were supposed to implement it. And there are only X number of bureaucrats, and now one person in one district is supposed to be looking at implementation of these 675 schemes. It's just not possible. So of course, state capacity is constrained, and also most of the schemes are very small. So just the 5, what you see here, these are like top 7 or 8 schemes. They alone account for 50% of overall allocation, whereas rest of the 650 odd schemes, they are responsible for rest of the 50% of expenses. So definitely a lot of administrative cost in administrating these schemes, but also it's not physically possible to monitor most of these schemes because you don't have enough manpower. So that explains why we are not able to effectively target people. Again, one lesson that we learned, that don't underestimate simple facts, just present simple facts, and don't overestimate sophisticated analysis. And this is how we initially began, because we were fresh out of college, and some of these fancy things, we used to take a lot of pride in. And when I first produced this chart, so in economics, there's something called Gini coefficient. So, X percent. So for example, 50% of the population, they only get, basically this chart tells you 50% of the poor population only get 30% share in the overall spending. Ideally, that should be 50-50. And clearly, when we first produced this chart and went to policymakers who are normally politicians, hard to get their attention, hard to explain it to them also, because, I mean, the background can also differ a lot. I mean, they may not have, economics background, so it's very difficult for them to understand some of these things. A similar thing here, poorer districts, the spending in these poorer districts declines as the districts become poor. And that's what we finally did. A lot of inputs here from our chief economic advisor, that how we should be presenting it to the policymakers. And it's a simple graph which shows, this chart shows you district-wise poor population. The red you are means you are poor, green means you are rich. So ideally, a red district, and here is the welfare allocation that goes to districts. So if you are red, ideally, you should be green in terms of welfare allocation. But you see, red is red. Green is green. So basically, again, money is going to already rich states and less money going to poor states. And when we presented this chart, was the first time when we were able to get attention of the finance minister. We were presenting this to the finance minister. And that's when he said, okay, this is an important thing, and maybe you should continue to research on it and produce a detailed report on it. And we did some more work. We combined some other data sources and produced some simple charts so that people can understand. For example, PDS is public distribution system, the biggest welfare scheme that we run in India. For every $100 that the government releases from the center, 36% is lost in corruption. Another 36% goes to the rich people. It is not supposed to go to rich people, but it goes to rich people. Again, it's a form of corruption. So out of 100, 72 is lost, and it's only $28 which is finally going to poor people. And again, I mean, a lot of work goes in the background and everything, but then what matters if we can produce something in a very simple chart. And this chart, at least at that point of time, was very powerful. It communicated what we wanted to, and everyone was excited about it. And we were asked to produce a detailed report, as I said earlier, and then we were given the platform of writing a chapter for an annual document of the Government of India, which is called Economic Survey, where we present some of these key policy ideas. And you can see one of the chapter was universal basic income. And again, I'm not getting into details here. It's important that when you write a chapter, you get a very detailed framework, you detail out everything so that people can read it. They can either appreciate it, or then they can criticize and tell you what is wrong and how it should be done. So benefits, UBI, benefit, favors, and against, what are the arguments. Again, what could be the cost? We exactly quantified it. So it would cost, say, 4 to 5% of GDP. Also, do we have space? So we give a framework that, okay, fine, you have 4 to 5% of GDP is a big cost. So, but then what are the existing schemes which are not running well, and maybe these are subsidies which go to middle class and other rich people, and you can get some money freed up from some of these schemes. So we presented a very detailed chart. We presented alternative scenarios that, okay, don't target all the people because if it is expensive, but again target people where it is very difficult to miss out on people, because if you give some discretionary people to discretionary power to bureaucrats, you will tend to miss out on people, because something will always be there which will make sure that you don't reach out to poor people. So make it very simple. For example, UBI for women. Now identifying women is of course very easy. UBI only for urban area, again very easy. Vulnerable groups like widows, pregnant mothers, again you have a database of these people, so again very easy to reach out to these people. We presented the framework as well. What are the basic infrastructure that you need, in terms of bank accounts, mobile connectivity, national identity number, and then what is the rollout as of now in different geographical locations. We again presented that so that we know whether we can implement it now, or how much time we need to prepare it. We presented it in economic survey, because of course the reach of economic survey is pretty large in India, as I am giving. So this particular, when we presented economic survey, and the document was read by around 21.2 million people across 192 countries, not just in India, but across countries. Of course, I mean, mostly Indians, because Indians are everywhere. Any part of the globe, you would find Indians. But yeah, important that we could reach out to so many people. But we also started communicating our research. We started getting invitation from different organizations, people who are doing similar work. So this one example here. So I was presenting my work here, my team's work, and the person that you see sitting there in green shirt is Dr. Abhijit Banerjee, and he was running a pilot in Kenya, and he was talking about his UBI experience in Kenya. So of course, a lot of these conversations happen, and we learn from each other, and we kind of refine our work. And the final impact was that many of the states, for example, Jammu Kashmir, it's committed to the idea of universal basic income. It put it officially in its budget. It somehow did not take off because of some other political compulsions. But yeah, I mean, many other states, say for example, Telangana is one state in India. They adopted a modified version of the template that we presented. Jharkhand, the state that I belong to, Odisha, another state, they also kind of adopted the framework that we had presented. And that's why I was saying that's very specific to, like, when we presented our framework, we were very specific so that these states they know better their circumstances, and they can tweak around the template that we are producing, and then they can based on their circumstances they can implement the policy. But yeah, very fruitful experience. We learned a lot in the process, and very happy to see many times research you do a lot, but finally on ground not much happens. But in this case, at least we at least like to think that we made an impact, and it's a very powerful idea, and many of the states are implementing it, and hopefully many states in future will again implement it. So that's my experience. Thank you so much.
Brilliantly done, Abhishek. Well done. Anyone who'd like to ask a question?
Too.
Yes, Mr. Ajurola. Would you like to make any comments, or anyone would like to make?
I was just thinking it's very explanatory and a powerful research that they are too. Very explanatory. I guess like
thanks so much.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think a really nice example of where you can do bits of analytical work, and 5 times out of 7 nothing happens. The 6th, people are excited, but nothing happens. And the 7th, you can really make a difference. So this is great. Wonderful. Well, we're keeping an eye on time. I think we're doing quite well. Now let's move on. I think it's Adrian next. Is that right?
Yes. Let me share my screen.
And just while Adrian's doing that, just to tell everyone, so the idea of today was really to provide some practical examples of what we have been able to do when collecting data of various sorts in the administration and applying them. And what we see throughout is that we're able to make difference. We're then going to talk next week about the management of data, but this is all within the idea of your own progress. And so I want you to think, as you see these last presentations, about what you've heard and what you're hearing, and say, you know, what's the data I might collect? What are the questions I might be asking? The surveys I might run? And then next week, how might I start to curate and manage data to get towards the sort of things that you're hearing here? So these are really trying to be personal reflections on what we've done, and I hope you'll take personal reflection in what you could do. So over to you, Adrian.
Thanks, Dan. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Adrian.
Great, thank you.
Yes, we can see it. Yeah.
So I wanted to share with you a little bit of a micro example about exactly what Dan was just talking about. I know we've heard some questions about managing data and how to use digital tools to make that easier. So I want to share a little bit about my experience, and you'll see that it really also connects to what we've been talking about already, the theory of change. Sorry? Okay. If there's a question, please feel free to come in. So this is from an example from my previous position, which is a little bit of a different context. I was actually working at an NGO, not directly with the government, but we were working with a lot of government partners in Tanzania, in Costa Rica, and in the United States. And the organization was focused on training for teachers, which is similar to some of what you've been talking about. And we really needed to collect data about whether that training was effective. Our research question was concerned with if our particular program, which was about high touch teacher coaching, if that improves student outcomes. But in order to answer that question, we had to have a really deep understanding of what teachers were actually showing up to the trainings, what they were completing, if there was program fidelity all the way through, in order to understand what aspects of our program were working well and what wasn't working well. And then what happened was during COVID, suddenly we had way more demand for our program, especially in the US and Costa Rica, where they were switching to an online model of delivering classes to students. So they started delivering classes on Zoom, for example, and really needed some training for that. So suddenly we had about 100 times growth in the number of participants in our program. And we had new reporting requirements for government partners. They wanted to be really informed about which teachers were participating and who hadn't participated yet. Many people needed to interact with the data. So we had our coaches needed to be able to enter who had actually attended and what they had discussed. It was a very high touch situation. So not only were teachers attending meetings, but they also were like having phone calls with the coaches, and that all needed to be recorded, which you can imagine was quite a manual process because we didn't have a lot of high tech solutions that could, know that this coach had called this teacher and automatically enter it. So the coaches had to be entering data a lot of the time, and we really wanted them to do that in a timely manner to ensure the quality of the data and that they remembered who they had actually spoken to. But because we had been a lot smaller before, the current system for collecting attendance was just in Excel, and it got very messy. So as you know, as I'm sure you have experienced, we were trying to consolidate all of this information in Excel into a nice report where you could go back to and refer and filter in different ways so you could see who had attended, who hadn't yet attended, what school you needed to contact to see how to encourage teachers to join. All of these different questions needed to be answered. And often we would come up against a lot of problems. So basically, we needed a solution that was quick to implement. There was a very small learning curve, both for the coaches and for the person setting up the new system, which at the time was me. So it needed to be something that I could learn in like a day, because we needed this immediately in a few weeks' time. It needed to be easy for some of our more tech phobic coaches who, maybe you've experienced this as well, but some people who needed to interact with the data were very adverse to trying some new technology. So it needed to be very comfortable. We needed automatic reports so our government partners could look at the report at any time and it would be accurate. And edits and corrections needed to update everywhere. So often when we had that nice filtered data in the Excel, someone would notice an issue or would want to use that to update a teacher's attendance. But of course, if they updated it in the report in Excel, it would not communicate. It would, those updates would not be reflected in other places. So what we ended up doing was using this very light relational database called Airtable, which I could show. I think it's not really suitable for the Ghanaian context or for like a government context where that has a lot more data to deal with. But for us, we were able to implement it super fast. It allowed that relational capability, and it kept all of our data really clean so that we could later transfer it to a more robust system. This led to, so COVID also led to new program possibilities. So some of the teachers really just wanted to understand how to deliver lessons online because that became a need during COVID. So that allowed us to create these new programs, but it also impacted our research question in a big way because we were trying to understand how our program influenced student outcomes, but what was our program? So we really needed to redefine what our program was, what counted as program completion and success. And what we ended up doing was going through our theory of change. And last week, we were discussing a theory of change in a very simple format, but we actually broke it out into a very long chain of events in order to identify all the assumptions, and worked with a lot of external stakeholders to clarify that theory of change and define exactly what teachers were expected to do and what coaches were expected to do throughout the entire program, so that when coaches would go to enter the data about program completion, it was just a checkbox for each thing that they need to do. But the positive side of this was that coaches then knew exactly what they needed to do. Program implementation became a lot easier and coaches were a lot more comfortable with what the expectations were. And we were much more comfortable with the quality of our data because we knew we had all of the same definitions. And that's basically in a nutshell. Unfortunately, after we implemented this, I did start my master's degree. So I don't have something to show you about the end result, but I know that they're still using the system and actually have migrated to a more robust system now that they had that time to transfer. And that the program is a lot more defined and coaches are sticking to the program a lot more easily than they were before.
That's great. Adrian, thank you so much. Really nice practical example of a problem you faced and how you solved it. Any questions for Adrian before we move on? You can also put them in the chat. Over to Mantasha, and then we will have about 10-15 minutes to wrap up.
Great. Thank you, Dan and Adrian. I will share my screen now. Please let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today, I will present before you a case study where public sector officials in a city used data to understand the impact of the pandemic on the retail sector in their city. This case study is more focused on what was the problem that the data was trying to solve, how that data was collected, and what were some of the initial results. Again, just to clarify, all of the material in this presentation is sourced from the Greater London Authority, the Smart London Board at the Greater London Authority. So this service was called the High Streets Data Service. So in collaboration with the London councils and 21 London boroughs, the Greater London Authority, or the GLA, it launched a new service that gives London borough officers access to data on the performance and health of London's 600 high streets and town centres, which will support the reopening, recovery and renewal of these very important social and economic centres. Now, just to clarify, what are high streets and town centres? So these are business centres which have outlets for shopping and eating out. If you know bits about London, some famous high streets and town centres that you may know of are the Oxford Street, Piccadilly, Covent Garden. Yes, Joshua. You had a question? I see a hand raised. Okay, just feel free to write. If you have a question, please feel free to write the question on the chat. So the High Streets Data Service, it uses spend and footfall data, so anonymized footfall data across London, both in its raw form and using a custom-built data explorer tool. Now, they use the raw form in the microdata forms just to enable bespoke and detailed analysis. This project, again, like coming back to the problem that this project aimed to solve, it addresses a need for better and more easily accessible data, including data gaps or functionality gaps, availability of raw data, and transparency of existing data. Now, previously, boroughs have had to negotiate directly with data suppliers, or they commissioned consultants to do in-depth analysis or undertake some sort of analysis. Now, this is often very expensive to outsource this, and it also gives only a small snapshot of activity over time. Now, why is it important? The Greater London Authority in this case took the partnership approach, and they were able to address these issues through collaboration. Now, they built local capacity and they promoted data-driven decisions. This is a new way for local governments to access, analyze, and use data. All of these three things that we at the Bureaucracy Lab are trying to get governments to build within their own units. Now, how was this done? By pooling resources and efforts. So what was the Greater London Authority able to do? They were able to buy data more cost effectively because they pooled resources, not just money, but other resources as well. They were able to in-house build a data explorer tool that is just designed for its users, and it's bespoke and very, very special. It also gives a London-wide view of high street activity. There are many high streets in London, and it's hard to know what's happening on each high street and what is the economic activity in each high street, and it's useful to compare. And this also created a space for borough officers to collaborate and share approaches and insights, because a lot of times these can be silos. Now, one of the main things within this project was the Data Explorer tool. And this was built in-house by the Greater London Authority to give non-data experts easy access to data. So someone who is in the public sector but has just started out and does not know anything about data can go to this Data Explorer tool and see and find out what they want to find out about these high streets. Unfortunately, I cannot actually show you the Data Explorer tool because it's internal to the boroughs and it's internal to the GLA, but I can definitely show you a few visualizations in the next few slides. Again, this Data Explorer tool was designed to tell the story of economic and footfall activity.
Abhishek, has Mantasha frozen for you?
Yeah, I can't hear her. I guess there's some issue at her end with network.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is just make a couple of comments on her presentation just while she comes back. So I know everyone, this is, you know, it's a London. You'd expect London to have pretty impressive, you know, data analytics systems. I think what this shows is that actually we're facing similar problems across the world in trying to get policy officers information that they can use to do their jobs well. And here it's a simple idea. Going back to the research question, the question is, my video on because it seems like we might be losing her for a little moment. The question is, how are my high streets doing? And how am I going to know that? Well, a good way to know that is footfall. It's how many people are trumping up and down the street, because if they're walking up and down the street, they're probably buying stuff. And so where do we get the data from? We've got the data. So it's exactly that same theory of change to data collection, to visualization that you've seen over the last few weeks in this course. Mantasha is showing at a relatively, you know, kind of impressive level. But then again, Adrian was using a very impressive app online. And so there's something there to learn as well. Everything that Abhishek was showing, as I put in the chat, we can capitalize on the fact that there's now this free to use website, Flourish, that Marco was saying he used a lot. So, you know, partly that these are some of the same basic themes that you've seen in your own work. But then secondly is they're kind of inspiring. They say, well, let's use the technology that now enables good data collection, good visualization that's free to use or very, very cost effective in the work that we all do, be it in Ghana, be it in the World Bank, or be it in the settings that we're hearing about. And so what I think Mantasha is really trying to showcase to us is here's something that London, which is a hub for, you know, IT and interesting things, is facing a similar problem and trying to put in a relatively simple solution. And that's something that I heard from all of your case studies as well.
Hi, Dan, I'm back, and I can quickly finish that in 5 minutes, just so there is.
That's wonderful. I was commenting on how universal some of the themes you were saying were.
Yes. I will just share my presentation again, and I will really try to wrap it up in the next 5 minutes, just so we have some time right after it. Yes, I was right here. I'll go through again, like what this Data Explorer tool did. It was designed to tell the story of the economic and footfall activity on any high streets through graphs and heat maps. It also building this tool in-house meant that the GLA was able to quickly build a product and then continue to adjust the product and update the product as things went along, as they got feedback from borough officers and they better understood the needs of their users. So I will show this graph, and this is very interesting. So you can, in this, it's pretty tiny, but this is all the screen space had. Now you can see changing retail and eating out spend in a high street, and that high street is Camberwell Road and Camberwell Church Street. Now, ideally, I would have asked you all why there is a normal activity line. There is a normal activity line just so it's a benchmark, and that's a baseline to compare 2020 and 2021, which were the pandemic years. So you can see in the graph, there was a definite spike from panic buying pre. So this is the lockdown one where everything shut down. And there's this spike where, which was from panic buying pre-lockdown. And there was a slow uptick in spend as we reached August. And then again, London had 2 more lockdowns, and there were like these smaller spikes before each of these 2 lockdowns. Now you can also see that this high street has recovered fairly well, because again, like, see, this is the normal activity line, and this is the situation as of July 2021. And orange is the retail footfall, and the blue line is eating out. I'll again show you some heat maps. Now, this Data Explorer tool also provides anonymized hourly information on crowd footfall. It is split by resident, worker, and visitor. So resident is someone who stays in the high street, worker is someone who's working there, and a visitor is someone who comes to shop. Now, we again are looking at an area in Camberwell where we can see a definite peak in visitor footfall on Thursday. I'm so sorry. Yeah, now we see that between 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., which were the working hours, there is very little activity, which is why this area is red. And this is pre-pandemic. Now, post-pandemic, and this is the heat map of the residents. So we see that residents in these in Camberwell between 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., which are working hours, do not come to the high street very often. Now, post-pandemic, which I'm assuming will show the effects of working from home, between 9 a.m. To 5 p.m., you see quite a lot of increase in terms of as a percentage of normal business. So you don't see that in the other in other times, but you definitely see this between 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So yes, quickly summing up, what did this Data Explorer do? It addressed 2 problems basically. So it provided data and insights. So multiple governments, when they purchase data, they undertake quality assurance, and they try to interpret the data individually. This is expensive and inefficient. It also means that, like I said, data is siloed and it is difficult to compare, and comparison is something that's very useful when you're running a city. So now pooling and coordinating resources within the GLA and within these boroughs and using the collective budgets, they were able to access a richer set of data, but they were also able to achieve efficiency by undertaking analysis to answer the questions that are common and are of interest to everyone. And the second one is presenting data in an easy to use manner. Now, like I said, a lot of people do not know how to use data, and interpreting and using the data, it can be very daunting for someone who's a first-time user. Now, the Data Explorer also allows non-data scientists, regular people, regular managers, who to access these insights and analysis. Over time, in the future, the project also aims to build some capacity, which is exactly what we're trying to do right now with different governments, build capacity and confidence within these boroughs and local councils in the use of data across local government. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mantasha. So now let me ask, is there anyone who'd like to ask Mantasha or Abhishek or Adrian a question? or has reflections more generally. And then if not, then, you know, if there are things that you think you'd like to share with the group, would very much like to hear it. Or of course, if there are things that you'd like to talk about from your own work, please let us know. So here's the opportunity to open up to you all. Okay, so why don't we do the following? Madam Elizabeth, if you're still with us, if you'd like to say some closing remarks, or if not, Madam Elizabeth, we can ask one of the others of her team. And let me just say this. So what we've tried to do today is show you some very practical examples of the range of you know, what we've learned so far being applied, not just in Ghana, which we heard many case studies from, but then also from around the world. As we move into next week, we're going to go back to some very practical technical activities, which are, if you have data, how do you manage it? What are the standards and protocols that you should adhere to if you're going to do this in a safe and respectful way? And then we're also very open to hearing from you what you'd like to learn more about. As we said, we have a Singaporean civil servant ready to talk to you all. And Madam Elizabeth, I don't know if you heard at the beginning, that was a response to your request. But then more broadly, you know, if there are particular skills here that you've heard, maybe, you know, integrating data with an app online, anything, just let us know, and then we can, you know, try to fulfill that. The best way to do that is through the survey that Adrian sends around. So please do fill it in. This is also a good moment, as we kind of are now into the meat of the course, to hear your feedback on what we could do better and what else you'd like to see us do more of. An example would be, we do plan to do a lab session with you, and so, you know, that'll come. So unless my team has anything else to add to that, then Madam Elizabeth, are you still with us? And then Alan, Jane, or Benedict, would any of you like to say some closing words?
Oh, okay. All right. So I would like to say thank you once again, Dan and the BL team, for this insightful moment and opportunity, especially for today, to share a lot of experiences and to find out what is happening elsewhere and to learn from the practices of other bureaucracies or institutions. We look forward to more exciting and more of such opportunities, and more importantly, the analytical bits of more important, how to analyze data and make much more meaning of it for policy decision making. So thank you very much, and thank you to all our colleagues for being active participants for this training sessions. We hope to have the best in the coming days. Thank you.
Indeed, but beautifully said. So we'll see everyone next week, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Adrian, just a reminder to stop the